Here's a compelling thought that I hope you sleep on tonight. But if blockchains do what they're supposed to do, there should be applications built on the chains that have a greater enterprise value than the chain itself. And to solidify this argument, I would ask you, Python is a programming language. Instagram is built on Python. And my question would be, if they were both tokenized, which one would be more valuable, Instagram or Python? And my answer to you would be Instagram. It would not be Python. And so if you believe that, then there is a consumer frontier that has to happen here. And if it doesn't happen sooner rather than later, I think this industry will have a ceiling set on it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mind with CoinFund, a weekly podcast about the untold narratives of the new internet. My name is David Pakman. I am head of venture investments. I'm one of the managing partners here at CoinFund. And today's episode is just going to be me as the host, but we've got a fantastic guest. And this topic is one that I'm particularly passionate about. With my background, I spent much of my early career in the digital music industry, really as music was becoming digital and that was becoming a new way of marketing and distributing music. I co-founded Apple's music group. I co-founded a startup that was one of the early streaming providers called MyPlay. And I was the CEO of eMusic, an online music store. And I've been passionate about bringing IP online since the early days of the internet. And the reason for that is that my belief is that when you have more efficient mechanisms for distribution, you can create more access to intellectual property, to entertainment and creative content, and you can provide a more direct path for the monetization of that content. And this has been one key area of focus for me as an investor at CoinFund. We've been focused on the NFT space, and we've been broadly thinking about ways that creators can build a brand online and distribute that through not just streaming, but maybe something more like digital ownership. And that's what Web3 really brings us. Maybe it's collectibles or entertainment or gaming. And so this next guest I'm super excited to have has been working closely in this area. And one thing that I want to spend some time on with him is when you bring intellectual property online, or in this case on chain, is it best to focus on existing intellectual property or use new forms of distribution as a place to create brand new content? So I'm pleased now to welcome Luca Netz, the CEO of Pudgy Penguins, to the show. Hey, Luca, good to see you again.
Hey, David, nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I don't know that every one of our listeners knows all there is to know about Pudgy. So if you don't mind spending a minute or two, tell everyone what this wonderful creative creation is and how well it's doing.
Yeah, so Pudgy Penguins was started in the summer of 2021 by a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds in college. They were responsible for creating what I believe to be, crypto's mascot and the most universal IP, crypto native IP that we've ever seen. Now, unfortunately, at the time, they were kind of head to head with CryptoPunks and Bored Apes. And it was really like the three trifecta of PFP NFTs that kicked off the big craze back in 2021 was really Punks, Apes, and Penguins. Unfortunately, they didn't really have the operational experience. And to be frank, they were so young, they didn't have too much experience, building companies or being entrepreneurs. And ultimately, while, apes and punks continue to do their thing, penguins were kind of left to the wayside. Now, I was one of their biggest holders. I was a huge fan of the penguin. I was able to close my eyes and believe as a community member the potential for this IP and for this project. And when it ultimately came down to the conclusion that they weren't going to take this thing where it needed to be, I decided that rather than just complaining and berating them on the timeline, I was going to step up to the plate and show them how it was done. And on the other side of it, from an entrepreneurship perspective, not only did I think I was going to show the previous founders on the Pudgy Penguin side how it was done, I actually thought we could show the entire space how it was done, because I had just seen so much money raised from venture and community with so little under this guise that everyone was building this next generation of brand. And then me being a brand builder for the last 7 or 8 years, I thought to myself, well, there's a lot of things that you guys are not doing from a brand perspective that makes it hard for me to believe that this is the next generation of brand, or at least how these guys are executing it. So not only did I think we could do something great for the Pudgy Penguin community, I thought we could disrupt the entire NFT space and set a bar as to how these things were built. So I think it was April of 2022. The deal closed. We bought Pudgy Penguins for about $2.5 million. We didn't really buy a business. We just bought a congregation of assets, so 60 different assets, including like contract addresses and trademarks and things like that. Unfortunately, the day we bought it, it was kind of the beginning of black swan after black swan, and the bear market kind of kicked off. Not only did the bear market kick off, royalties went away. So we had to bankroll the business with another $500,000. We didn't really pay ourselves for the first year, had to get really scrappy and had to just go to our roots of building a traditional consumer brand. uh, you know, Create something that's growable, forecastable, projectable, but also something that builds affinity in the real world. And instead of waiting for consumers to come to us, we wanted to meet consumers where they were. There will be a moment where that paradigm will completely shift, but today, physical is still important for human beings. And then the rest is history. We grinded away, faced every trial and tribulation that I think a crypto startup can face, and I think we've been the best performing NFT asset of the last 2.5 years. Still a long ways to go, still a lot to do. We've sold, just over 1.5 million toys, individual units. We're in 10,000 retailer, 11 or 12,000 retailers today across the globe. Walmart and Target probably being the two biggest, but we're now expanding, to Asia in a really meaningful way with a partnership with Lotte and Line and a couple others. The goal for us is just like, I think there's really two goals internally, specifically around Pudgy Penguins, which is we want to be the face of penguins around the world. When you think penguins, I want you to think Pudgy Penguins, and I want to be crypto's mascot. When you think crypto IP, I want you to think Pudgy Penguins. When you think, what it means to be a crypto native character, I want to be the face of that. And I think we're making meaningful strides to achieving both of those goals.
Yeah, well on your way. So I've got a bunch of questions for you about Pudgy, but before we get to that, you've got a unique background that I think kind of suits you or prepares you for the task you've undertaken. Can you share a little bit about how you got to this moment?
I won't give you the monologue, but if you like sit there and think for 5 minutes on what I'm about to tell you, you could probably see how the alignment is pretty interesting. Uh, I grew up homeless with my mom and my brother, so I think that helps from dealing with adversity. Crypto is a very stressful business. Then I was a high school dropout, first job at a tech startup called Ring. Pudgy Penguins is very much a tech startup. We'll get into that probably at some point in this conversation. Uh, then I started selling solar over the phone. That's how I learned how to speak well. That's pretty important, being able to communicate to your community. And then I got my big break in e-commerce, really built my career around building brands and monetizing influence with physical products. Pudgy Penguins is very much an influencer, and I'm very much monetizing that influence with physical products. But I was able to basically do $250 million in revenue doing that business. I then went and brought a company back in 2020 called Von Dutch, which was like a very infamous clothing brand that most people are familiar with. That gave me the confidence to take something that had once lived and died and bring something back to life. Pudgy Penguins very much was that. And then went to co-found and become the CMO of a company called Gel Blaster. So Gel Blaster was North America's fastest growing toy company, $0 to $100 million in sales in 14 months. And then obviously gave me the relationships within the toy business, Walmart, Target, et cetera. And then my current tenure is obviously being the CEO of Pudgy Penguin. So that's the brief rundown. And ultimately, all of those things have led me to be where we are today.
You can sort of pull each one of the threads and see how they're important in creating what Pudgy's become. So let's just spend a minute about explaining, make sure everyone understands the different types of SKUs that you offer today. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the community of buyers and what's unique about them and who you focus on.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got hundreds of SKUs at this point. I mean, building IP from a product basis is really about SKU diversification. I think we really range on like two spectrums. One spectrum is like the cheap, affordable for everyone. Obviously, per how I grew up, I don't want to have an inaccessible brand. That's just not per my nature. And so, we have toys that are cheap as $3, with high-end collectibles, which you can kind of see behind me that range, for as expensive as $250, and they'll resell on eBay for $5, $6, $7, $1,000. So there's really like two ranges to the brand. One is more premium, more aligned with the NFT, and the other is more for everyone. The interesting part about NFTs is I very much think I'm in the demand creation business, which I think is done through IP proliferation and affinity creation. And so, the cheap price point items, I think, do really good at those two things, which is, we sold 1.5 million toys in basically, 15 months, and that's proliferating the IP and it's creating a lot of affinity for people from all walks of life. And I think, and that's one side. And obviously on the higher end side, it's more for like the connoisseur, the collectible aficionado who, wants to participate in the Pudgy Penguin brand. They can buy the high end physical collectibles, or they can redeem or buy the NFTs. And I think that's probably the two pillars from a product perspective. From a brand, like this is kind of counterintuitive, but I think we have less of a demographic and more of a psychographic. I think, and this was really hard for me to digest in the beginning. There's a person who sits on our advisory board. His name is Jess Richardson. He was the head of licensing at Hasbro, and now I think he's head of licensing now at Just Play. So two of the biggest, toy companies in the world. And I was really frustrated about this the first 6 months. I was like, who's our core demo? Like, who am I marketing to? And the answer he kept coming back to was like, Luca, you're a brand for everyone. So like, stop trying to put yourself in this bucket. Like a 5-year-old can enjoy a penguin, a 60-year-old can enjoy a penguin. And that's very much true within our community, right? I think really what we want to become from like a brand, and so that's why I say we were more of a psychographic, like who loves Pudgy Penguins? I think it's somebody, who, appreciates, fun and cute and is lighthearted and is a good person and is funny. I think it's more of like a personality type more than it is, hey, we are selling to girls 10 to 15, and that is our target demo. Because naturally, a lot of the NFT collectors are not kids, right? And toys, unbeknownst to most, are actually, tapering up to the older generation more than the younger generation. There's actually an interesting statistic that the younger generation actually does not buying toys. It's now the 15 to 18 to 20 to 25-year-old kid adult, which I think is pretty fascinating. I can get it. We probably won't get into that, but there's like a whole thesis as to why that is. What I want to become above all else, I think the role that we really want to play is I want to be the first, and I think we've kind of already accomplished this, and staying true to our crypto roots. Like I want to be the brand in crypto that everyone can resonate with, that everyone can identify with, and that everyone can participate with. Meaning, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're from, if you're participating in the space, but more importantly, you being able to sit down at the dinner table and, you, David, being a venture capitalist in the space, somebody who's had a great career here, you being able to sit with, your niece or your nephew, your son or your daughter, your friend or your family member, and then actually being able to somewhat understand or participate in the industry you've dedicated your life to. And I think this is really the gap we've been able to fill over the last couple of years, and really where we want to represent crypto, right? Is like the family friendly entry point for anybody who wants to participate in this stuff. And so hopefully that gives you a little bit of clarity as to
Yeah,
what
it's
we're looking
awesome.
for.
So one other just orienting question. So when you think of like your total universe of customers or community members, what percentage of them own a physical product versus a digital product or both?
Yeah. So over the last couple of months, we've been really honing in on this because naturally there's a price point for our current digital collectibles, right? And as we continue to succeed, they just continue to get more expensive, and so that kind of handicaps us from really getting people digitally native. We're going to solve that in probably the next 3 to 4 weeks here. So I think it's going to be a really exciting moment for the space, one that I think no one's expecting, but it's going to be a point where the idea of having these tokens is alignment. I own a Pudgy Penguin. I am aligning with the success of the brand, and I can participate with the success of the brand in a meaningful way. 3 months ago, before making this decision internally, I would have said significantly more people will own a physical Pudgy Penguin product, and the NFT will be the first edition and will be the prize collectible within the ecosystem.
Mhm.
Today, that thesis remains the same, but I now have a new solution to how I think a digital product can play into this ecosystem. The NFT 8,808 Penguins are still the first editions, right? They're still the premier collectible. They're the ones that have the entire access and are the backbones of the lore to this entire business. But I don't know which one will proliferate more on the digital and the physical side. I will say right now, the physical side is winning by a landslide. We have, 2.5 million toys out there in the world. That's just on the low end product line. And so right now we're proliferating, in the real world, probably greater than we are within the Web3 and crypto ecosystem. But I think that will change shortly. We'll see.
So that's interesting because a lot of people would conflate digital access with wider access and easier saleability rather than physical. But in your case, you've done such an incredible job getting distribution, physical distribution. Like there, I mean, to be in 11,000 retail locations, people are encountering Pudgy probably daily or weekly in the physical world compared to online. So it's interesting that's flipped for you. Very different than most other online predominantly collections.
Yeah, it is important to note though, and I think this is probably the most interesting part about the story of the toys was like we didn't just sell toys. Obviously, you're probably familiar with the fact that every toy that we sell is actually an NFT held by a holder that we license, kind of alchemized, brought to life. And every time one of those toys sells, they get a royalty in perpetuity. But I think one of the most beautiful parts is every toy comes with a birth certificate. On that birth certificate, there's a QR code. And when you scan that QR code, you're basically you're asked to sign up to Pudgy World. You put an email and a password, or given a custody wallet through a custody wallet solution. And then you're asked to redeem 3 to 5 digital NFTs that are wearables all through a guest experience. So you basically can be digitally collecting on chain with nothing short of a $3 purchase of a toy. And the goal here is like once we open up the game and the platform that kind of ties into this entire experience, we open up the economy. Imagine a world, and this is where I think we could be really disruptive to just the entire consumer product industry. Imagine a world, and this was our initial thesis when we kind of came up with this, but imagine a world where you buy a toy for $3 at Walmart, you scan a QR code, you unlock some digital collectibles, you sell those digital collectibles digitally for maybe $6, right? So you're already in the money $3, and then you also have kept your physical. Retail is all about value propositions and bang for buck, and that is an unbeatable value proposition to anything on shelf. This idea that I can buy something physical, unlock something digital, sell that digital for a profit or break even, or even any amount of dollars, right? Depending on the rarity and kind of where it ranks, while keeping the physical item. That is an unbeatable value proposition. Now, we actually launched our toys with this value proposition live. And what we ended up seeing was people were spending thousands of dollars on these traits, right? They range from common to epic and rare. And so I wanted to contain it because I didn't want people to over speculate because that leads to a disaster, which we wanted to avoid. But we ultimately, the beauty of that though, right? With the little moment we saw of that was people were buying toys, making posts saying I made an $80 Amazon order and some dude just bought one of my traits that I unlocked for $800, right? Like this is awesome. Right. And if you can do, and the problem is the reason why we nixed that is because it really was fueled on speculation, which is not healthy and ultimately leads to misery, which I don't want to kind of follow suit on. That we've seen that many times in the NFT space. If you have an economy, right? So these traits tie into this 3D Pudgy Penguin that you then can go play into an open world game, right? So if the economy is working and the game is working and there's users, right? And this flywheel will automatically churn, and that will be releasing in the next couple of weeks. And when that actually goes live, and if we can gain the momentum that I think we can gain, that I think just presents a really disruptive use case for these digital collectibles that I think flips the entire consumer product industry on its face, because then it's going to become a battle between who has this value proposition and who doesn't. And any consumer that values their dollar and is educated on this difference between product A, which is Pudgy Penguin with this value proposition, and product B, which is Star Wars, doesn't have this value proposition, they're going to take their hard-earned money and put it towards product A, right? Anybody who's fiscally responsible will probably go A, and it'll be incredibly disruptive. So excited to kind of see how that works here shortly.
Yeah. So let me make an observation first and ask you a question. As creative types or content types shift into the digital realm or onto new platforms, there's sort of you're confronted with either taking existing IP, successful IP, and trying to get it in the format or channels of the new platform or distribution, or creating new IP. And of course, people do both. But you could look back historically and see that, think about YouTube. As YouTube was created, most people thought it was just like going to be television on the internet, right? We'll just upload all the TV shows and that's what you'll use or you'll watch. And of course, from a rights perspective, that turned out to take a very long time until like TV shows and movies were available for streaming online. But in the interim ensuing period, Google, through their stewardship of YouTube, created a much, much larger and more successful product than one that's just streaming existing, pre-existing TV and movies. And it introduced all these new creators. We've had like 15 years now or more of like YouTubers. I think about streaming of games as creating its own sort of format of entertainment, the online game streamer. I look at vertical video like TikTok or Snapchat before that and Instagram Reels. And you're not watching Star Wars that way. You're watching, I don't know, some form of the 10 or 20 or 30 million influencers in the world. So you can see like kind of new IP or format specific IP or creativity dominating these new distribution formats long before traditional IP shows up. So here we are with, let's just call it digital collectibles broadly, or, scarce digital items. And you've chosen a path where it's novel IP. You didn't go to Disney and ask to license Star Wars and try to bring it on chain. Do you see the framing I'm offering here as an interesting one? And was it this intentional? Did you look at sort of Web3 and linked physical digital collectibles and say that it should be new?
I think the difference between traditional and legacy IP and I guess crypto native IP that I think is incubated and created in this way, I think is alignment. And I think people want to be a part of a story and they want to create something from the ground up. I don't think you can see. I think during hype cycles, it can work. But I think when, and crypto is secular in the sense. So it's like, I don't think during times of turmoil, those things can survive the way that I think a Pudgy Penguin can survive or a CryptoPunk.
Mm.
What these tokens do is they create alignment and they basically take people who are holding these assets and they align them and their thought and their brain power and their attention and their energy within the interest of the brand. So I have this slide that we did on our recent raise, and it was Disney and Pixar and all of these on one side, and then Pudgy Penguins on the right side. On the left side, with Disney and Pixar, it basically showed the relationship. And the relationship between Disney and Pixar has with its customers, it's very much brand and then consumer, right? And that's the relationship. There's create amazing products and movies and TV shows, and then consumers consume, and then they rinse and repeat. The interesting part about incubating, I think, Web3 native IP is there's a new relationship that's formed, and there's a prong in the middle of that, which is you have brand, you have participant, which is your early believer, your NFT holder, the person who is aligned in the success of the brand. Again, this is how you treat it, right? So I treat it through this lens. Uh, and then you have the consumer, right? So this is kind of a reinvention of the IP business, kind of the first time it's done. And examples of this is, hey, every toy that we sell is actually an NFT held by somebody else, and they're getting a royalty in perpetuity every time it sells. And we've almost paid out $1 million, right? And this is only in 12, 14 months of selling physical products really at scale. This is beautiful. There's no other, I can't go buy a first edition Charizard and, get a royalty in perpetuity. I can't get access to, all these premier events because I have a first edition Charizard. I can't get all of these free benefits that other people who want to be a part of this community or see our success and want to reward it. Like there's no way to index who owns a first edition Charizard or not. Right. So it's a reinvention. Now, granted, there's a lot of people who I think sell NFTs in crypto and they're not Web3 businesses. So I have this controversial take, which is I don't think Web3 is the technology in which you build. I think it's the cadence in which you build it, meaning I can sell NFTs all day and I can be a Web2 business. I'm just selling digital products on blockchain payment rails. That does not mean a Web3 business. A Web3 business is for the people, by the people, right? And so this approach of this like grassroots IP is like, every 2 weeks I get on a 90-minute call with the community. What ideas do you have? This whole Pudgy world integration and physical to digital redemption on the toys, that was incubated there. Half of the good ideas that you see at Pudgy Penguins are not my ideas, right? I'm simply the muscle to the hive mind that is the community. And that is the delineation, right? On one side of the spectrum, anyone can sell digital products, right? And that can be through Stripe payment rails or Ethereum payment rails. Doesn't really matter, right? But I think the difference is, hey, we have this origin story. This origin story is this NFT collection, right? This is the community. This is the nucleus, and we just build on top of that, right? And I think this is kind of the superpower. And so ultimately, what you're able to do is like, yeah, there's certain things that I did that were super impressive, and we get billions of views every month on social, and we're in all these stores. But a lot of that momentum, was initially started because of the community. And so typically anybody who started a business, like your first 1,000 customers is always the hardest. I didn't have to go through that curve. And give you guys a perfect example. Gel Blaster took 18 months before it hit its first $100 million in revenue. But the real money was made in the 14 months. It was the first 4 months. It just went 4 months of getting the first 1,000 customers was the hardest thing. And then once people consumed the product and they used it, it hit this crazy bell curve. It was actually longer, like 20 months. Right. And then, so 6 months of just nothingness, right? Just like a stale, dead, floundering business. And then once it took. So for me with Pudgy, I didn't have to do the first 6 months nonsense. We launched on Amazon. I told the community the day before, I said, hey, there's a reason we're launching on Amazon. The reason why we're launching on Amazon is because I want to trigger the algorithm. Right. And if I have 4,000 or 5,000 active participants, I'm like, if you guys all go and buy at the same time when I release this tomorrow, we will hit the algorithm. We'll be one across the board. Coincidentally, I was right. we launched the toys, and we were one across every toy sector and everything. And mind you, I had went to Bentonville and I went to I went to sell Walmart. Walmart didn't take us,
Mm.
right? So it wasn't until the $500,000 in 2 days headline and basically ran out of inventory did Walmart saw that. They called us. They said, "Hey, we're going to put you in a pallet in the middle of the store in quarter 4, which is the most prized real estate that Walmart can ever give you in the most perfect season. But you got to do it in 3 months. You got 90 days to get 1,000,002 toys, like an
Mhm.
insane amount of toys." But it was because of that. If I wasn't number one across the board, if I hadn't done that, but it was because I had this group that was aligned. It's like, yeah, like and what I told them is like, look, if we're number one across Amazon, that's great for you. That's great for your NFTs. It's more attention. It's more eyeballs. The beauty about NFTs from an investment perspective, right, is for if you're collecting it to potentially return capital is the finite supply in which the tokens live. So the beauty is there's only 8,888 tokens, right? In this case, Pudgy Penguin NFTs. That's not that many, right? In Pudgy Penguin's case, you can assume 20% of them are gone forever. I know this because we've run the data, right? So I've really got, 7,200, right? NFTs. Any given time, there's 200 listed, maybe 1,000, 2,000 active. So the point of the matter is the more eyeballs, the more love, the more exposure I get the brand, the more demand. There's a finite amount of supply. I'm committed to not issuing any new NFTs. Like I've just seen it 10 times already that issuing NFTs is how you kill your NFT business. And so I think that's just like the way you kind of see these things work. And as the NFT succeeds, they're more incentivized to galvanize, they're more incentivized to champion, right? We sell more product, right? They have more liquidity to buy more product, and then just becomes a cascading flywheel of success.
Is one of your arguments here that when you upgrade the relationship between a creator and a consumer, a brand and a customer, to include a participant or a co-owner or somebody who's really invested in the long-term success of the product, you get different behavior that is good behavior for business, but it also helps sustain you through the hard times. You sort of started the conversation by saying that, we go through these macroeconomic cycles. So do movie franchises, by the way, right? Like where you have a bomb or you go long duration between releases. And is that kind of one of the ways you see durability of brands in a consumer world?
Yep, you hit the nail right on the head. The argument is ask anyone who's participates in fandom if they would love to participate in the success and in the growth and in the development of a brand, right? These are people that are dressing up to Comic-Con in full suits with no aligned interests other than affinity, which is fleeting. It's powerful, but it's fleeting, right? Especially when, humans have to survive, right? So they're just that value proposition is always gonna win. It's just like putting my toy on shelf with a digital unlockable that can cover the cost and not give you a profit, right? Like it's a game of value proposition. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you have to think to yourself, what's the best experience that I can provide the customer? What's the best value proposition I can provide the customer? If you have the best value proposition, you have the best experience, then ultimately you become unbeatable, right? Like you're winning in business, right? If your experience is better than your competitors. And that's ultimately where I think this lives, right? Hey, you can go buy a first edition Charizard or you can go buy a first edition Pudgy Penguin, and one will give you the opportunity to return, participate and grow and thrive within this
Mhm.
ecosystem. And another won't, right? So I think ultimately now you have to develop time, right? What those other brands have that I don't have is I don't have tens of years of affinity, right? So, decades of affinity. I think this is really important because, how does the collectible market work? The collectible market is really interesting in the sense that a lot of collectibles prices are driven by people who want to feel like kids again. So,
Mm.
for example, I've actually found myself doing this, now that I have kind of climbed the financial ladder. I am now looking for nostalgic pieces of my childhood that will make me feel like a child. And a lot of that stuff is not any of the new IP, that is the IP that I grew up consuming, right? And that's how most IP and collectibles are really the high-end collectibles are really consumed is, hey, I want to buy the first edition Charizard, and that meant so much to me. I love Charizard, right? And like now I want to own a piece of that history. I remember playing with the Pokemon cards, right? There's one aspect of it that's just a time thing, right? You just have to be in the game. But I think you get there, you build things faster, you get more momentum with this alignment. And I think the IP business, to usually break through in a meaningful way, it takes decades. I think with this alignment layer, this participation layer, you can do it takes decades. And I think, 70% of the time, you know, so, what would usually take, or 50% of the time, would usually take 10 years, I think you can do in 5, right?
Mhm.
Like Pudgy Penguins and 11,000 stores.
An accelerant for sure, right? Maybe this was the answer, but one thing we like to ask our guests, Luca, is what's the one thing in crypto that no one's talking about that more people should be paying attention to,
I think everyone's talking about them, but the meme coins.
right? Want to talk about meme
So
coins for a minute?
I want to talk about this idea of tokenization and the biggest unlock that I think nobody knew was possible with this narrative, which is really what it is, which is I think tokenization, intangible things tangible. I think you're opening up an entire new market sector when you do that, right? Like you're taking movements, you're taking culture, things that had, you know, huge economic impact, but no way for somebody to speculate or make money on. I had this article say that basically said it's on the Abstract's website, but I said, "What is consumer crypto?" And I explained it, at least what my thought process on consumer crypto was. And one of the things that I had kind of talked about was one of the biggest thing companies you'll see in the next 10 years in crypto is going to be the person who cracks a system and a flow and an experience where people can make intangible influence tangible, because influence is the biggest thing. It runs the world, right? But like, I can't speculate. It's like a bit cloud style product like that went up in flames because I don't know why they messed that up so bad. But the point of the matter is that was in the right light. Like, okay, Luca's a young entrepreneur. Let me buy some Luca coins and like bet on his success, right? Or I know Logan Paul's doing a fight, so I'm going to bet on if he gets knocked out, his career's done. I think this idea of just taking intangible things and making them tangible, meme coins are like the best version of that. But I think there's many different ways. For example, in there I reference IP tokens, right, which is kind of what Pudgy Penguins is, or consumer brand tokens, right? Think about how many culturally impactful consumer brands there are, but they're not like huge EBITDA businesses. Like they're not like printing money out the wazoo, but they're setting the tone for culture. I mean, I could say that about, some stores in New York City or in Los Angeles that pioneer huge trends across the globe. Like they're what, a $5 million a year business, right? There's a huge unlock of value here that I think is going to come around this idea of tokenization and making intangible things tangible. And I think you're going to hear a lot of this moving forward. And this is a open ocean. Like the TAM here, I don't even know how you can quantify it or factor it in. I mean, it's almost a ceilingless TAM. I mean, it almost can go as big and wide as you want it to, depending on how much liquidity is frothing around these blockchain rails, which I think is only increasing every single day.
So I think this is an unbelievably powerful idea that you're articulating. I think of the intangibles. Well, let's see. Web 2 got very good at monetizing attention.
Mm.
Provided it captured your attention in that moment, it was monetizing it. It did it asynchronously. Only a small portion of Web 2 is live. Like the creator and the viewer are live at the same time. That's, I don't know, 10% of all viewing time. But everything else is monetized asynchronously. But it did a great job of monetizing that attention, mostly through ads, but a little bit through subscription. But all these other things that you're talking about, let's use some words like membership or affinity or brand excitement or fandom. These are like maybe just 4 words to describe this relationship that someone has with something creative or a creator or a product or a service, that when you're not currently in the middle of using that product or service or enjoying it, there's no way to represent your interest, and it's hard to monetize it. But if you tokenize it, and there's probably some more words we could throw in there, not only do you get maybe some economic benefit of being a member or affiliate, but you have some ownership in it, and you've got some way to express that. I guess that's what I wanted to ask you for a second about meme coins. For me, putting aside the sort of economically nefarious, sort of just pump and dump component to it. Hey, look, I'm a member of a tribe or interested in a product or in a person or an influencer or a meme or something, and I want to own a little piece of it. Like it's an expression, right, of affinity. Isn't that kind of profound?
It's incredibly profound, right? And I think you're seeing it in this box right now, which is this like degenerate casino gambling box. I think it's really the lens in which you kind of look at it. it's the lens that most people are looking at it.
Right.
The difference between NFTs and meme coins, I think NFTs do camaraderie and identification. I think they do it so much better, right? Because if I'm a part of a tribe, right, being able to see somebody else like on Twitter or on Instagram that is like a like-minded individual, it's part of my tribe, it's part of my family via a profile picture, I think is the most powerful and meaningful piece of marketing that anyone can conjure up. It is proliferation personified, right? And
And,
so
and the old version of that was limited. You're probably too young for this, putting bumper stickers on cars or putting logos on backs of denim jackets or wearing button pins or, maybe an extreme like a tattoo. These are the very limited alternatives to what you're describing in the digital realm.
I think what meme coins do better than NFTs is anyone can participate. So again, I think it's like a little NFTs become a little tribal. Like for example, not everyone can afford a $25,000 Pudgy Penguin, which is what one's today, right? So I think you can build bigger tribes with the meme coins. I think you can build closer tribes with NFTs. You know, depending on where you look at it, but one could be a pro and a con, and the other could be a pro. And so just no matter what lens you look at it, I actually believe in the thesis of having both, right? I actually think it's the perfect way because I think everyone should be able to align, but not everyone should have the first editions.
Yeah, for sure, right? And in fact, like this was someplace the music industry's finally arrived at that you can monetize super fans higher than other fans economically. They'll pay for front row tickets, but a lot of people can go to the concert.
Exactly.
Maybe we could wrap up this fascinating and awesome conversation, Luca, with what should we look out for in the next 6 or 12 months in the world of like on-chain IP and maybe predictions or just like things to watch, things to take note of.
I think we're taking a big bet here in these next couple of weeks. So I would pay attention to the Igloo ecosystem in the sense that we're going to try to set the tone as to what I think these things look like in their final form. Kind of already alluded to it a little bit in this conversation, so we'll see. I'd pay attention to that. I'd pay attention to consumer applications. Consumer is the final frontier. It always has been. I've been preaching this, I think, for the last 2.5 years. The problem is, and maybe David, you and the CoinFund group can solve this. The problem is there's no juicy North Star for everyone to chase after, right? Everyone's still betting on infra because you have Ethereum and Solana looking at you dead in the face and you're looking at it from a return perspective. But here's a compelling thought that I hope you sleep on tonight. But if blockchains do what they're supposed to do, there should be applications built on the chains that have a greater enterprise value than the chain itself. And to solidify this argument, I would ask you, Python is a programming language. Instagram is built on Python. And my question would be, if they were both tokenized, which one would be more valuable, Instagram or Python? And my answer to you would be Instagram. It would not be Python. And so if you believe that, then there is a consumer frontier that has to happen here. And if it doesn't happen sooner rather than later, I think this industry will have a ceiling set on it. Now, the ceiling is still a lot bigger than where it is today and a lot further than where it is today. But there's two things that are going to happen here. These blockchains either become the payment rails and the rails for the next internet economies in which the TAM is hundreds of trillions, or Bitcoin is digital gold. There's programmable money, and then there's speculation, which is probably a TAM of 20 to $25 trillion, right? The first one is the one that I want, and I'm sure the one that you want as an investor, but you won't get to number one if you don't have Instagrams built on Python, right? If Ethereum doesn't have its and this is one example. I mean, there's hundreds of examples, right? Programming languages and apps are apps. But this is the year of consumer. We've broken through institutions. Institutions are here. We got them. We got the ETFs. There will only be more. But if we really want this thing to have hundreds of trillions of dollars in TAM, we need to break through to consumer. And we are at the final frontier for crypto adoption, which is consumer. But David, it starts and stops with people like you. Consumer can't get funded for the life of it. I see guys left and right, and it starts with the capital allocators. So hopefully that resonates with you. And
Does. I mean, we love what you're doing. We've invested in a lot of different consumer businesses in both NFT and the gaming space. I loved your notion here that we need some really big successes because capital tends to want to comp new things against existing ones. So I hope that's the Igloo ecosystem. Everyone watch what Luca and his incredible team do with Pudgies. This is an awesome conversation, and thank you. And everyone out there, thank you so much for listening. If you are building something on the edge of the new internet, maybe something in the consumer space or something in on-chain IP, we want to know about it. My handle on Twitter is Pakman, spelled Pakman. And where can people find you, Luca?
They can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Luca Netz, and give us a follow at Pudgy Penguins across all socials. I promise you, your life will be a little bit better for it.
Make sure you download Mind with CoinFund where you get your podcasts, and we'll be back soon to dig deeper in the blockchain space. Thank you, everyone.